the Havana betrayal, the Kendall and Gwendolyn Myers, espionage case. They lived in the heart of Washington, D.C., surrounded by diplomats, scholars, and government secrets. They spoke of peace, ideals, and academia. But behind the curtain, they were working for Fidel Castro. The story of Kendall and Gwendolyn Myers reads like a Cold War thriller, except it played out in the 21st century, years after the Berlin Wall had fallen, and when most Americans believed the age of ideological espionage was over. But for the Myers couple, it had only just begun. Kendall Myers was a man of stature and intellect. A descendant of Alexander Graham Bell, he carried a name that demanded respect. He held degrees from prestigious institutions, a B.A. and Ph.D. from Johns Hopkins, and was a professor of political science, deeply immersed in academic circles. Eventually, his passion for diplomacy took him to the U.S. State Department, where he became an expert on European affairs and gained a top-secret security clearance. He seemed like the perfect diplomat, scholarly, thoughtful, even tempered. But he was hiding something that would unravel over 3 decades of betrayal. His wife, Gwendolyn Myers, was no stranger to the halls of Washington either. Though less high-profile than her husband, she was his confidant, his partner in crime, quite literally. Their marriage wasn't just built on mutual affection or academic curiosity. It was built on a shared ideology, a romanticized view of Fidel Castro's Cuba, and a commitment to aid a regime seen by the U.S. as a hostile power. The Myers weren't driven by money. In fact, when it came to espionage, they were paid very little, perhaps just a pittance across the decades. No luxury accounts, no offshore bank trails. What motivated them was belief, a deeply rooted, almost religious admiration for Cuba and its revolutionary ideals. They believed the United States was arrogant, imperialistic, and corrupt. They saw Cuba as a symbol of resistance, of justice, of anti-colonial virtue, and they wanted to be part of that fight, not from the mountains of Sierra Maestra, but from inside the walls of American power. According to court documents, Kendall Myers first visited Cuba in 1978 during a State Department-sponsored academic trip. But it wasn't just sightseeing or policy talks. It was the spark that ignited everything. In Havana, he was introduced to Cuban intelligence officials, and it was there that his recruitment allegedly began. The trip was transformational. He returned not only with a suntan, but with a mission and a handler. Soon after, he began passing classified information to Cuba through clandestine meetings, encrypted messages, and old-school spycraft. Dead drops, coded phone calls, and messages exchanged through grocery carts and bookstore aisles became part of their double life. Over the years, Kendall would use his access inside the State Department to pass along everything from intelligence reports to the names of U.S. operatives. Sometimes he would summarize documents by hand. Other times, he'd memorize them and report back to Cuban agents in secret meetings. And all the while, no one suspected a thing. For nearly 30 years, the Myers couple operated under the radar. They were never flashy, never careless. They didn't live lavishly. They didn't take reckless risks. Their operation was quiet, calculated, and shockingly consistent. They had meetings with Cuban agents in New York. They sent messages via shortwave radio. On at least one occasion, they reportedly received instructions through coded voice broadcasts, the kind used during the Cold War, where numbers and phrases were read over static-filled airwaves. They were ghosts, untraceable, hidden in plain sight. While Kendall worked at the State Department, rising through the ranks and gaining access to increasingly sensitive material, Gwendolyn assisted in transmitting the intelligence. She was often the courier, the silent operative who supported the mission with absolute devotion. But in the world of espionage, no one remains hidden forever. By 2009, suspicions had begun to swirl. Cuban intelligence operations were increasingly under the microscope, and the FBI was looking to unearth long-term moles that might still be active within U.S. institutions. That's when the trap was set. An undercover FBI agent, posing as a Cuban intelligence officer, contacted Kendall Myers. The agent claimed to be sent by Havana to reconnect and re-establish contact. And remarkably, after decades in the shadows, Myers took the bait. In a series of meetings secretly recorded by the FBI, Kendall and Gwendolyn Myers spoke candidly about their past espionage activities. They reminisced about their trips to Cuba, discussed their previous intelligence work, and even joked about their ability to stay off the radar for so long. In one recorded conversation, Kendall admitted, "We were just idealistic and probably a little naive." But there was no sign of remorse. In fact, he described Castro as one of the great political leaders of our time. That was enough. In June 2009, the Myerses were arrested. The FBI had what they needed: a confession, physical evidence, and decades' worth of betrayal to unravel. In court, Kendall Myers pleaded guilty to conspiring to spy for Cuba and illegally retaining national defense information. Gwendolyn pleaded guilty to conspiracy to act as an agent of a foreign government. The judge called it a stunning betrayal of country. Kendall was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Gwendolyn received 6.5 years, a significantly lighter sentence, but one that acknowledged her central role in the conspiracy. In their final statements, neither showed much regret. They spoke of their loyalty to truth and justice, claiming they had acted out of conscience, not malice. But to the U.S. government, their actions were nothing short of treason. The Myers case shocked many not because of violence or high-speed chases, but because of how quietly the betrayal had occurred. For decades, two ordinary-looking intellectuals had lived a lie in one of the most secure and politically charged cities in the world. They weren't career spies trained in Moscow. They were professors, analysts, dinner party guests, and weekend hikers. And yet, in their briefcases and conversations, they carried secrets that could cripple American diplomacy. The intelligence community had been breached not by force, but by ideology. The story of Kendall and Gwendolyn Myers is a chilling reminder that espionage isn't always fueled by greed or desperation. Sometimes, it's powered by belief, by a vision of the world that sees the enemy not in a far-off land, but in the nation one calls home. Their betrayal cost lives, exposed operations, and created vulnerabilities that would take years to mend. They weren't coerced, threatened, or blackmailed. They chose this path, not for money, not for fame, but for a cause. And in the shadowy world of espionage, that makes them more dangerous than any paycheck-driven spy could ever be. If you found this story shocking, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. There are more untold stories of espionage coming your way. Stay vigilant, stay sharp. Until next time.